Sophie had finally found a rare moment of peace after a long, exhausting day, curling under her soft blankets in her bedroom with the faint glow of the bedside lamp casting warm, comforting shadows across the walls. The quiet house offering a sense of calm she rarely got, but just as her eyes were beginning to close, a soft creak interrupted the silence, her heart jumping as she turned toward the doorway and saw her stepson Ethan standing there, hesitant, his usually confident posture replaced with an awkward uncertainty that immediately drew her concern. She blinked in surprise, trying to process why he would come to her room so late at night, and he shifted awkwardly, avoiding her gaze, mumbling that he couldn't sleep, that he just needed to talk. And Sophie felt a mixture of worry and curiosity, sensing that whatever was troubling him was heavy enough to bring him out of bed and into the quiet of her room at this hour. She invited him in with a soft voice, careful and gentle, and he sank into the chair by her bed, still avoiding eye contact, and she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands fidgeted nervously, as if carrying invisible burdens, and Sophie realized that tonight would not be ordinary. That something important was about to unfold between them, something unspoken that neither had anticipated but both could feel lingering in the air. She asked softly what was on his mind, trying to keep her tone calm and soothing, and Ethan hesitated, struggling to find words, then finally spoke about how lonely he had been feeling lately, how difficult it was to feel understood in a house that sometimes felt more like a set of rules than a home, how he missed the simple warmth of connection that he couldn't find anywhere else. And Sophie felt a pang in her chest, recognizing the vulnerability in his voice, the quiet plea for comfort and understanding, and she nodded, encouraging him to share more, listening intently as he described moments of isolation, the pressure of expectations, and the way he often felt like he had to hide parts of himself to fit into a world that demanded perfection. And as he spoke, Sophie couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in him over the past months, how he had grown quieter, more introspective, more sensitive, and she felt an unexpected bond forming in the shared silence, a quiet recognition that both of them carried feelings and experiences that were rarely acknowledged by the outside world. She offered gentle reassurance, not pushing, not judging, simply listening and validating, and Ethan seemed to relax slightly, his shoulders loosening, his voice becoming steadier, and Sophie felt her own emotions stirring, a combination of protectiveness, empathy, and a tender awareness that this moment was rare and precious. She remembered the long hours she had spent managing the household, the distance that had existed between them before, and now here he was, reaching out, seeking connection. And she wanted to respond with kindness and understanding, to offer him warmth without crossing boundaries, to acknowledge his feelings while maintaining the safety and respect that defined their family bond. And in that delicate space, an unspoken understanding passed between them, a recognition that both were human, both were fragile, and both needed comfort in their own ways. She thought about how often people dismissed the quiet struggles of others, how easy it was to overlook loneliness when life was busy and noisy. And now, in this quiet night, Sophie realized how important it was to simply be present, to allow someone to be seen and heard without expectation, without judgment, and Ethan seemed to sense her empathy, his eyes flickering toward hers for a brief moment, the trust implicit in that glance speaking volumes, a silent acknowledgement that this room, this late hour, had become a safe space for him to express what he couldn't anywhere else. Sophie felt her heart tighten. A mix of compassion and something more subtle, a soft awareness of the complexity of human emotions. The way longing and care could intertwine even in relationships defined by family roles. She reminded herself to stay gentle, to honor the boundary between care and deeper emotion, yet the night carried a weight, a sense that change was quietly approaching, that this small act of sharing could shift their understanding of each other in ways neither had anticipated. And as Ethan continued, he spoke about fears, insecurities, and moments of doubt that weighed on him daily, about the pressure of expectations, about the silent desire for someone to truly understand him. And Sophie felt a profound connection, realizing that the moments we think are ordinary often carry more significance than we imagine. That a simple conversation could be transformative, could plant seeds of trust and understanding that might grow in unexpected ways. And she offered gentle nods, soft words of reassurance, careful not to overstep, yet present enough that he knew he was valued and heard. The room seemed to hold its breath, the night itself becoming a witness to the unfolding of trust, a quiet intimacy born not of romance but of emotional closeness, and Sophie thought about the fragility of youth, the way the world often failed to provide comfort to those who needed it most, and she felt gratitude that she could be there, that this moment, however fleeting, was theirs to share, and Ethan's voice softened, a mixture of relief and lingering tension, and Sophie felt an urge to linger in the presence of this vulnerability, to simply be a steady figure in a storm of uncertainty, to offer warmth and understanding, and as the hours passed, the room remained filled with a quiet electricity, not of passion, but of deep emotional resonance, of trust forming quietly between two people navigating complex feelings, and Sophie realized that this night, this unexpected intrusion, had opened a door to something profound, a reminder that connection often arrives when we least expect it, that the heart can respond in subtle ways to the needs of others, and that sometimes, just being present, listening without judgment, can change the course of someone's day, week, or even life, and she felt a gentle hope stirring, a recognition that the bonds we form in small, quiet moments can leave lasting impressions, shaping the way we see each other, the way we understand ourselves, and she watched Ethan finally lean back in the chair, exhaustion mixed with relief etched across his face, the tension easing just slightly, and she knew that while the night was far from over, this moment of trust had laid the foundation for something meaningful, a connection that honored vulnerability, respected boundaries, and acknowledged the delicate complexity of human emotions. And as she whispered a few more words of comfort, encouraging him to rest, Sophie felt the gravity of the night settle around them, quiet but profound, a night that began with a creak of the door and had grown into an emotional turning point, a night that would linger in memory as the first step toward understanding, empathy, and the gentle, unspoken bonds that define family and human connection. And as Ethan finally rose to leave, he offered a small, almost imperceptible smile, a fragile but real sign of trust, and Sophie felt her own heart respond, quietly, tenderly, aware that this night had changed something in both of them, something subtle yet powerful, a recognition that emotional honesty and the courage to reach out could bring unexpected comfort and hope. And as the door closed behind him, Sophie remained in the warm glow of her room, reflecting on the intensity of shared vulnerability, the strange beauty of human connection, and the quiet, unfolding journey that had begun in the stillness of night with nothing more than a hesitant knock, a soft creak, and the courage to speak, knowing that some moments, though fleeting, could leave a lasting imprint on the heart, shaping the way we understand love, trust, and the profound need to be seen and understood. The next night, the house felt heavier, quieter, in a way that made Sophie's chest tighten as she remembered the events of the previous evening, the conversation with Ethan lingering in her mind like a fragile thread she didn't want to lose. And as she moved around the room, tidying small things and glancing out the window at the soft glow of streetlights, she wondered what would come next, whether he would knock on the door again or if the moment they shared would fade like a dream upon waking. But she didn't have to wait long because a soft creak from the hallway announced Ethan's presence once more, and this time, he didn't hesitate at the door. He stepped in quietly, his eyes searching hers for some unspoken signal, and Sophie felt her heart skip as she nodded, silently inviting him to sit, aware that the tension from the night before had not left entirely, that the air between them carried a weight of anticipation, vulnerability, and curiosity, all wrapped together in a delicate balance that could easily be disrupted yet somehow felt right in its stillness. And as he lowered himself into the chair near her bed, Sophie noticed the subtle shift in his posture, the way his shoulders were slumped yet his eyes carried a quiet intensity, as if he were holding back thoughts too complex to voice, and she waited patiently, allowing him to find the words, to express himself without pressure, and the room seemed to shrink around them, the soft glow of the lamp highlighting the contours of their faces, the silent breaths connecting them in a strange intimacy that neither had expected but both felt. And Ethan finally began to speak, his voice low and careful, about the struggles he had faced during the day, about moments of frustration at school, the feeling of being misunderstood by friends and even by family. And Sophie listened, each word pulling at a thread inside her heart, reminding her of the fragility of youth and the quiet storms that people carry alone. She leaned slightly forward, offering gentle nods and murmurs of understanding, careful not to rush him, letting him unpack the weight of his thoughts in his own rhythm. And as he continued, he spoke about moments of loneliness, about the pressure to succeed, about the fear of failing those he cared for, And Sophie felt tears prick her eyes, not for him alone but for the universal ache of feeling unseen, unheard, and unappreciated, and she realized that the connection they were forming went beyond simple conversation. It was a meeting of hearts, a recognition of shared vulnerability, a silent acknowledgement that some things could only be expressed in the quiet hours of the night, in the safe space created between two people willing to truly see each other. And as the minutes stretched, their words flowed more freely, their laughter mingling with quiet sighs, the room alive with the unspoken understanding that trust was being built brick by brick, that emotional intimacy could be as powerful as any spoken confession, that connection could heal in ways nothing else could. And Sophie felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet thrill of empathy and care, realizing that this was not just about him, not just about her, but about the delicate dance of human emotion, the give and take that defined relationships of every kind. And as Ethan looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of relief, hesitation, and a fragile hope, Sophie knew that this was a turning point, that they had crossed a line into something tender and meaningful, yet still bound by respect and understanding. And she smiled softly, allowing him to sense her reassurance without overstepping the delicate boundaries that defined their relationship. And as he spoke about moments of regret, times he wished he could have done better, words left unsaid, and actions not taken, Sophie felt the depth of his heart, the courage it took for him to bear such vulnerability, and she silently admired his honesty, the way he trusted her enough to share this part of himself, the way he leaned into her presence without demanding, seeking comfort without expecting. And she realized that the power of listening, of simply being present, was immeasurable, that sometimes love was not about declarations or grand gestures but about the gentle act of witnessing someone's pain and holding space for it. And Ethan's voice grew quieter, more intimate, as he spoke about the moments he had longed for guidance, for someone to understand the complexity of his feelings, for a place to feel safe and accepted. And Sophie felt a shiver of empathy and protectiveness, the kind that stirred deep in her heart, reminding her of the fragile beauty of human connection, the way hearts could resonate with one another when barriers fell away. And she spoke softly, offering encouragement, acknowledging his courage, validating his feelings without judgment, creating a thread of trust that neither could see but both could feel. And as he leaned back, a mixture of exhaustion and relief on his face, Sophie noticed the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the easing of tension in his body, the faint sparkle of hope in his eyes, and she realized that this was more than conversation. It was a quiet transformation, a moment where vulnerability became strength, where honesty became intimacy, and where the human heart, in its longing and its fear, found a small sanctuary. And the night seemed to stretch infinitely, the quiet ticking of the clock marking the passing of time that felt both fleeting and eternal, the room filled with the soft music of breathing, of gentle glances, of words unspoken but deeply felt. And Sophie understood that these moments were rare, precious, not to be rushed or squandered, that the care they took in speaking and listening was creating an emotional map, a guide for understanding, respect, and the delicate potential of love in its many forms. And as Ethan began to discuss his dreams, his fears of disappointment, his desire to be seen as capable yet understood as vulnerable, Sophie felt a stirring of tenderness and admiration, the kind that made hearts ache with both longing and hope, a mixture of emotions that was thrilling yet safe, profound yet gentle. And she remained patient, her responses measured and sincere, creating a rhythm of dialogue that allowed both of them to breathe, to feel, to connect without overstepping or demanding more than the other could give. And as the night deepened, the shadows in the room grew longer, yet the warmth between them remained, the subtle light of understanding and trust illuminating their faces. And Sophie realized that the bond they were forming was rare and delicate, a connection built on vulnerability, patience, empathy, and the quiet courage to share what was normally kept hidden. And Ethan's voice finally softened into a whisper, speaking of small moments of gratitude, fleeting joys, and the tiny sparks of happiness that often went unnoticed but mattered deeply. And Sophie felt a smile tug at her lips, realizing that even in the midst of struggle, connection could create light, that the human heart, when acknowledged and nurtured, could heal and grow. And as Ethan rose to leave, he hesitated, glancing at her with eyes full of unspoken emotions, a silent acknowledgement that this night had changed something between them, something subtle yet undeniable, a shift in trust, in understanding, in emotional intimacy. And Sophie watched him leave, closing the door gently behind him, feeling the lingering warmth of their shared moment, a quiet ache of longing mixed with hope, and she knew that the nights to come would continue to test, challenge, and deepen this bond, that the journey they had begun in hushed tones and quiet glances would evolve, twist, and grow in ways neither could predict, yet for now, the night had been theirs, a testament to the power of listening, of empathy, of the delicate beauty of human connection, and as she lay back in bed, the glow of the lamp still warm against her skin, Sophie allowed herself to feel the emotional resonance of the evening, the thrill of connection, the ache of longing, the tenderness of shared vulnerability, knowing that sometimes, the quietest moments carry the heaviest weight, that trust is built in whispers and glances, and that love, in its gentlest form, is often found not in declarations but in the courage to simply be present with another heart. And she drifted to sleep with the memory of Ethan's soft eyes, his tentative voice, the fragile bond formed in the stillness of night, a bond that promised care, understanding, and the quiet magic of connection that could shape hearts and lives in ways both profound and gentle. The days after their late-night conversation passed in a mix of quiet anticipation and subtle tension, Sophie noticing the smallest details about Ethan that she had overlooked before, the way he paused before speaking, the way his eyes would flicker toward hers, the way he seemed both withdrawn and eager, a combination that tugged at her heart in ways she hadn't expected, and she found herself thinking of him more often than she wanted to admit, recalling his words, his gestures, the way his presence seemed to create a gentle warmth in her otherwise routine days, and Ethan, too, carried the memory of that night, the sensation of being heard, of being understood, lingering like a gentle echo in his mind, and he realized that the connection he felt with Sophie was unlike anything he had experienced before, a mixture of comfort, admiration, and an unspoken attraction tempered by respect and the boundaries of family. Yet each glance and small interaction during the day brought him closer, not in inappropriate ways but in a yearning for emotional closeness, for the reassurance that someone cared deeply for him in a world that often felt harsh and demanding, and Sophie noticed the shift as well, the way her heart responded to his presence, the way ordinary moments seemed charged with subtle meaning, and she understood that this bond, delicate and complicated, was growing quietly, forming a foundation that could support trust, understanding, and emotional intimacy if handled with care. And one afternoon, while preparing tea in the kitchen, she felt a sudden awareness of him standing in the doorway, watching her with a tentative smile, and she returned it with warmth, both of them aware that their connection had shifted, deepened, become more conscious, yet remained unspoken. A thread stretched carefully across the space between them, and Ethan broke the silence, asking about her day, her thoughts, and dreams, and Sophie answered, noticing the way he leaned in slightly, listening intently, responding thoughtfully, and she realized that these moments, small yet profound, were shaping a pattern of mutual care, respect, and subtle longing, a rhythm that neither had consciously chosen but that felt inevitable, natural, and deeply satisfying. And as days turned into weeks, Sophie and Ethan developed this quiet language, the way he would linger near her while helping with chores, the way she would notice his gestures of concern for small details, the way their conversations would drift into shared memories, reflections, and dreams, and it created a sense of companionship that felt both thrilling and comforting, a mixture of emotional resonance and gentle excitement, a soft awareness that something significant was unfolding without urgency or pressure, and Sophie felt a bittersweet longing, knowing the strength of the bond and yet understanding the fragility of its circumstances, the fine line between care and deeper feelings, the social and familial boundaries that must guide their actions even as their hearts pulled them closer. And Ethan, too, felt the pull of something unnameable, a combination of admiration, gratitude, and an innocent yet intense attraction that made him seek her presence while still respecting the rules, the unspoken agreement that allowed emotional intimacy without crossing forbidden lines. And one evening, as rain pattered softly against the window, Sophie found herself sharing a story from her childhood, memories of laughter and mischief, of small disappointments and fleeting joys, and Ethan listened with rapt attention, his own memories intertwining with hers, and in that quiet exchange, both felt the soft thrill of connection, the gentle heartbeat of understanding, a shared emotional space that allowed them to exist together in vulnerability and trust. And as the storm outside intensified, so did the intensity of their emotions, Not in a passionate or inappropriate way, but in the depth of feeling that comes when two souls recognize each other's inner world, and Sophie noticed the slight tremor in Ethan's hand as he reached for the cup of tea she offered, a gesture small and innocent, yet laden with subtle significance, the kind of unspoken acknowledgement that can make hearts race and emotions swell quietly. And she responded with a reassuring smile, the kind that spoke volumes without a word, offering comfort, safety, and a recognition of shared humanity. And as the night wore on, their conversation shifted to dreams and fears, ambitions and insecurities. And each revelation brought them closer, their shared understanding deepening with every word, every glance, every breath, until the room seemed to hold its own consciousness, the air between them charged with the energy of connection, the fragile thrill of emotional intimacy that danced along the edges of their interactions. And Sophie realized that she had never felt such a combination of protectiveness, admiration, and gentle longing, that her heart responded not just to his words but to his presence. The way he carried himself, the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability that he allowed her to witness, and Ethan, in turn, felt a mixture of gratitude, comfort, and a quiet desire to stay near her, to linger in the warmth of her care, to learn from her patience and wisdom. And yet he understood the delicate balance, the boundaries that could not be crossed, the respect that had to guide his feelings even as they pulled him toward her. And one evening, while Sophie was reading by the lamp, he approached quietly, pausing at the doorway, hesitant yet drawn by an invisible force, and she looked up, their eyes meeting, and in that silent exchange, they communicated more than words could convey, a recognition of longing, of care, of mutual understanding, yet tempered by the awareness of what must remain unspoken. And Ethan finally said, softly, I feel like I can tell you anything. And Sophie's chest tightened, a mixture of warmth, protectiveness, and a soft thrill of connection, the recognition that hearts could meet in subtle ways, that trust could form quietly, without drama, without overt gestures. And she nodded, her smile gentle, acknowledging his feelings while maintaining the safety of their bond. And as he lingered, shifting his weight from foot to foot, she noticed the delicate tension in the room, a gentle energy that made her heart race in a restrained, careful way. And she realized that attraction could exist alongside care, admiration, and respect, a complex blend that required awareness, patience, and emotional maturity to navigate. And Ethan continued, speaking about moments of doubt, times when he felt isolated, the unspoken longing for guidance, for connection, for someone who could see him fully and accept him without question. And Sophie felt a wave of empathy and tenderness, realizing that the quiet acts of listening, validating, and being present were shaping a bond more profound than she had anticipated, a bond that would endure if nurtured with care, respect, and patience. And as the night deepened, they shared small stories, subtle jokes, fleeting glances, and silences that spoke volumes. And in each exchange, both felt the slow bloom of intimacy, a delicate dance of emotions, attraction, and understanding that required no overt declarations, only presence, patience, and mutual respect. And Sophie noticed her own heart responding in ways that surprised her, a gentle flutter, a warmth that lingered long after the conversation ended, a quiet thrill of connection tempered by awareness and responsibility. And Ethan, too, felt a stirring in his chest, a mixture of longing, gratitude, and an unspoken acknowledgement that the bond they were forming was rare and precious. And as he finally stood to leave, hesitating at the doorway, he offered a small, meaningful smile, a silent promise of trust, of care, and of the intention to nurture their connection while respecting boundaries. And Sophie watched him go, the room suddenly quieter yet still alive with the echoes of their shared conversation, and she allowed herself to feel the emotional resonance of the night, the thrill of connection, the ache of longing, the sweetness of vulnerability shared and respected, knowing that some of the deepest bonds are forged in moments like these, in quiet conversations, in unspoken glances, in the courage to be emotionally honest. And as she lay in bed afterward, the lamp casting soft shadows across her walls, Sophie reflected on the intensity of the past few days, the subtle shifts in their interactions, the growing awareness of attraction, care, and emotional intimacy. And she realized that love, in all its forms, can be gentle, profound, and transformative without breaking boundaries, without rushing, without drama, and that the path they were on, though complicated, held the promise of understanding, trust, and the delicate thrill of hearts slowly discovering each other's depths. and as she drifted to sleep, the memory of Ethan's quiet voice, hesitant glances, and tender presence lingered, a gentle, glowing thread of connection that promised hope, warmth, and the possibility of something meaningful blossoming with care, patience, and emotional honesty. The nights that followed brought a sense of quiet anticipation and unspoken understanding between Sophie and Ethan, the small moments they shared during the day carrying a weight of significance that neither could ignore. And Sophie noticed the subtle ways he lingered near her while helping with chores, the careful attentiveness in his voice when he asked how her day had been, the slight, almost imperceptible glances he cast toward her when he thought she wasn't looking, and each time her heart responded with a flutter of warmth, a recognition of the deepening connection, and she found herself thinking of him more often, recalling his words, the vulnerability in his eyes, the trust he had placed in her, and Ethan, too, felt the pull of these shared moments, the quiet thrill of being understood, being seen without judgment. The awareness that this bond they were nurturing was rare, delicate, and incredibly meaningful, and he often replayed their conversations in his mind, analyzing every glance, every word, every small gesture, finding in them a sense of comfort, admiration, and gentle longing that made him yearn for her presence even more, yet he respected the boundaries that defined their relationship, understanding that care and emotional intimacy could exist without overstepping, and Sophie felt the same, a mixture of protectiveness, empathy, and a quiet, tender attraction that made her treasure each shared laugh, each moment of vulnerability, and each subtle sign of connection, knowing that these nights were shaping something profound and lasting, a foundation built on patience, respect, and mutual trust. And one rainy evening, when the house was filled with the soft rhythm of water tapping against the windows, Ethan quietly entered her room once again, this time with a steadier gait, a small, tentative smile, and Sophie, sensing his quiet nervousness, offered a warm look that invited him to sit, and as he lowered himself into the chair near her bed, the air between them felt charged with an unspoken tension, a mixture of anticipation, tenderness, and the comforting knowledge that they were not alone in their feelings, and he began to speak, softly at first, about the changes he had noticed in himself, how he felt more confident, more grounded, more capable of navigating life's challenges simply because he knew someone cared, someone understood, someone truly saw him, and Sophie listened intently, her heart swelling with empathy and pride, realizing that their connection had become a source of strength for both of them, a subtle but powerful force that transformed ordinary moments into experiences of deep emotional resonance. And as he spoke about small victories, fleeting joys, and the comfort of having a safe space to share his thoughts, Sophie noticed the gentleness in his voice, the way he allowed himself to be vulnerable without fear, the quiet bravery it took to lay bare emotions that had long been hidden, and she responded with warmth, offering words of encouragement, validation, and gentle guidance, careful to maintain the respect and boundaries that framed their bond. And Ethan smiled, the tension in his body easing, a sense of relief washing over him, and in that moment, Sophie realized that emotional intimacy could be as powerful as any other form of connection, that trust and understanding could create a bond stronger than any superficial gesture or fleeting interaction. And as the night wore on, they shared more stories, reflections, and dreams, each word carrying layers of meaning, each glance speaking volumes, each silence filled with mutual awareness and appreciation. And Sophie felt a thrill in the quiet, a recognition that these moments, simple yet profound, were shaping the course of their relationship in ways that were subtle, respectful, yet incredibly moving. And Ethan, too, felt the same, a gentle flutter in his chest, a sense of warmth and anticipation that mingled with the comfort of knowing that Sophie valued and cared for him deeply, and they both became attuned to the rhythms of each other's emotions, the soft shifts in tone, the fleeting expressions, the small gestures of care, understanding, and trust, and this awareness created a language all their own, one built on empathy, patience, and the quiet thrill of emotional intimacy. And Sophie realized that while the connection between them had grown, it was grounded in safety, respect, and the conscious choice to nurture feelings without letting them cross lines. And Ethan, recognizing the same boundaries, felt a mixture of longing and gratitude, the bittersweet recognition that love could exist in a gentle, measured form, a love that honored roles, responsibilities, and the complexities of life. And as the night deepened, the room seemed to hold its own heartbeat, the quiet presence of shared understanding and mutual care filling the space, wrapping them in a cocoon of warmth, trust, and subtle, tender emotion. And Sophie spoke softly about her own experiences, her own moments of doubt and longing, her own vulnerabilities, and Ethan listened with a rare attentiveness, offering support, empathy, and acknowledgement. And in these exchanges, they found a delicate balance, a way to express feelings, share burdens, and experience closeness without ever compromising the integrity of their relationship or the boundaries that defined it. And the storm outside seemed to mirror the quiet intensity within the room, a rhythmic backdrop to the unfolding tapestry of emotion, connection, and subtle attraction. And Sophie felt a gentle sense of hope, realizing that the care, trust, and empathy they shared had the power to shape their interactions, their understanding of one another, and the way they approached life. And Ethan, in turn, felt the quiet thrill of being truly seen, truly heard, and truly understood, a feeling that brought both comfort and a restrained exhilaration. And as they continued to converse, their words flowing naturally, their silences rich with meaning, their glances carrying unspoken acknowledgement, Sophie felt the weight of the night settle into something soothing, something profound, something that hinted at the possibility of deeper understanding and perhaps, in time, an enduring bond built on patience, empathy, and respect. And Ethan, noticing the subtle smile on her face, the warmth in her eyes, felt a soft sense of joy, an inner light that brightened the quiet darkness, a feeling that made him grateful for the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to share, and to nurture the bond that had quietly grown between them. And as the clock ticked on, neither noticed the passage of hours, so engrossed were they in the quiet magic of connection, the soft thrill of understanding, and the deepening emotional intimacy that required no overt gestures or dramatic confessions, only presence, patience, and awareness. And when the night finally drew to a close, Ethan rose, hesitating at the doorway, casting a glance back that was heavy with unspoken meaning, a mixture of longing, trust, and gratitude. And Sophie, sensing the silent promise in his eyes, smiled softly, nodding in quiet acknowledgement, knowing that their bond had grown in ways that were subtle yet profound, delicate yet enduring. And she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, an understanding that sometimes the most meaningful moments are those experienced in silence, in trust, in shared vulnerability, in the simple act of being present for one another. And Ethan, stepping out into the hall, carried with him a quiet warmth, a sense of hope, and the realization that emotional intimacy, patience, and care could create bonds stronger than fear, loneliness, or doubt. And as the door closed behind him, Sophie lay back on her bed, the lamp casting soft shadows across her walls, reflecting on the journey of the past nights, the growth of their connection, the thrill of subtle attraction, the power of empathy, and the gentle magic of hearts slowly discovering one another's depths. And she understood that while the road ahead might be complicated, the foundation they had built, based on trust, patience, understanding, and mutual respect, would guide them through, allowing their bond to flourish in a way that was both emotionally rich and morally grounded, a quiet testament to the beauty of human connection, the delicate balance of care and attraction, and the enduring power of love expressed through empathy, understanding, and the courage to share one's heart while honoring the boundaries that make relationships safe, meaningful, and lasting. And as Sophie drifted into sleep, she carried with her the warmth of the evening, the quiet resonance of shared emotions, and the gentle hope that their connection, nurtured with care and honesty, would continue to grow, bringing comfort, joy, and the soft thrill of knowing that hearts can meet, trust can flourish, and love, in its gentlest and most profound form, can thrive even in the quietest, most unexpected moments.